Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, welcome back to your... Is this your first flip? It is your first flip for this unit, right? Welcome back to your first flip for this unit, for unit number 4. We are going to be expanding and understanding the ideals of the Renaissance period in Europe, right? This is one of those units that a lot of y'all are going to really enjoy. Typically and traditionally, my students in my class really enjoy this unit a lot because of the smaller test that comes along with it, and also a lot of kids really tend to enjoy the project as well. Now, speaking of the project, it is a major component of this unit. It's worth 50 points. Count them, 50 points of your test grade, okay? So the way, again, you figure this out is by going over to Google Classroom, jumping down to here, and start off by clicking on this sheet and giving it a read, right? You're reading and just trying to understand, like, what am I doing? How are we understanding this? What you need to know is basically you are creating a presentation based around one piece of Renaissance art, right? You want to focus on things like when it was created, who created it, what are the main points of the composition, i.e., who are these people inside of this painting? Why are they located there? Is there symbolism to the things that are around them or that have to do with the different objects or why they're standing the way that they are? Is there a mythological story behind the characters inside of it? If so, what is it, right? Now, remember, you also want to focus on interesting facts, engaging material about, like, hidden items that are going to represent different pieces of symbolism, and any information that gives your art meaning, right? So also, other fun stories to focus on are things that have happened to it over time, parts of its story and history, right? For example, the Mona Lisa was stolen for about 4 years. I am going to be doing an example presentation of the Mona Lisa, recording that this week and posting it onto my flipped classroom so you can use that as a good example for an artwork presentation. But you're just going to take a look at your artwork, try and find out as much information as you can. You get one note card, front and back, to bring up to the front of the classroom with you, and you're going to present for about 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes at a time, you're going to be like, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and bang! 50 points of your test is going to be locked up. You find your artwork assignments here. That is where you're actually going to, like, discover which one you are doing. If any of you are missing an artwork assignment, send me an email and we will figure it out, okay? But getting back into what we were talking about in class, we left off in class talking about, first of all, you need to write down that underneath your Italy map on your, like, actual notes, but we already did all this part, so you don't necessarily need to write down these 3 things, right? So the big thing about it is we left off in class talking about how the Renaissance is going to begin in Italy, right? We need to know, though, why did it start in Italy? We're going to focus on that in this flip. We're also going to discuss, like, a lot of other major components when it comes to the Italian Renaissance spreading outside and going to your northern countries and things like that, right? The state of Italy, though, just so you know, going into the Renaissance is very politically divided. Oftentimes, these people were at war with each other. But just so you know, Italy, quote-unquote, is not a country during the Renaissance, right? And also, countries don't even really exist yet in Western civilization's history. You don't start to get, like, countries and municipalities until about, like, the 1800s, depending on who you ask and depending on which one you're looking at, right? So the thing about it is these different little city-states all throughout Italy were not joined together. They were independent city-states that governed themselves, right? So the big 3 were Venice, Milan, and Florence, right? You upset over there? All right, so, like, Venice, okay, being that trade importer and merchant city with that embargo that they actually had with the Byzantine and the Ottomans, so they brought in all those goods, right? You can see a picture of the Venice right there, the city of the canals, right? The city on the water that brought in all those items and trade goods. Then you've got Milan, which was a massive trade hub where all the items passed through, and it's how they made their amount of money. And then you have Florence, the city of banking and textiles that my wife visited before, that my wife and I visited a few years ago. It's absolutely gorgeous and absolutely fantastic, right? So the thing about it, though, is you do have one more that you can label on your Italy map if you want. You don't have to, but you do need to know this place, okay? So the thing about it is, a lot of y'all might have been asking yourselves, like, but wait a minute, Mr. Terry, well, what about Rome? I know for a fact I heard a couple of kids in class thinking that one of the cities was going to be Rome. A couple of kids were like, I know Cristolara was, Caroline Gutierrez were just like, wait, so Rome has got to be one of these places, right? Well, interestingly enough, no. Mostly due to the political construct that was happening in the city of Rome at the time. Rome would... You two quit fighting. Got, like, these little babies over here, like, arguing with each other. Come here, come here. Y'all aren't even fighting, you're just playing, and you're just causing a ruckus, all right? So anyway, now the big thing about it, though, is Rome at the time of the Italian Renaissance was the capital of one of the only country or city-state spaces in Italy during this time. And that place was called the Papal States. So this big middle chunk area of Italy was actually called the Papal States. And since it was called the Papal States, it was controlled by the Catholic Church, right? So the Catholic Church actually governed that entire territory, and the Pope was considered the ruler of that governmental body, which I know sounds a little bit weird. Why does the Catholic Church have a country of its own? We'll get into that stuff a little bit later when we actually talk about the Reformation, right? So the thing about it, though, is that Papal States area, that's what Rome was, okay? So Rome was the major city and focal point of that place, okay? So that's the Papal States. You will need to know about them going forward. But also you need to focus on the fact that Renaissance ideas don't really have a start and stop date. The weird thing about this, stop trying to get down. The weird thing about this unit is that it doesn't have a lot of like major key events, right? Like we talked about in the last one, the Middle Ages unit, we've got 1347, the plague hits Europe. We've got 1066, the Battle of Hastings, 476, the fall of Rome. We've got 1215, the Magna Carta.
Yeah! Yeah!
Yay! Right? So fantastic stuff right there. You've got all those major dates. The Renaissance doesn't really have like dates per se, not nearly as many anyway. You got a couple that when you want to look at the political things, but that's more of an AP concept that we go over, right? In this class, we're focusing on the fact that the Renaissance had a lot of ideas, right? The Renaissance ideas focus on the ideas of rebirth, right? So the ideas of the return of European intelligence, economics, and prosperity, okay? So the Renaissance represents that rebirth that starts in Italy and leads to a new interest and development in art, literature, science, learning, architecture, and the growth and expansion of European modalities and economics when it comes to intelligence, right? People start to think more like the ancient Greeks and Romans, and they believe in their ability to create and achieve different items and get better at certain crafts and actually become masters of trade and artisanal things like painting frescoes and stuff like that. Now, going forward, though, that's all the Italian Renaissance. Thinkers also, you need to know, focused on one key central idea. The entire Renaissance movement really hinges and focuses around the growth of this ism word, right? So this word is so important because it's defined as re-examining old ideas, discovering new ones, and focusing on the world around us, right? Oh, thank you. And that ism word is known as humanism, right? Do me a favor, jot that down right there. But this new idea of education leads to the concept of humanism, okay? So highlight humanism. Humanism is crazy important, okay? Humanism is the idea of studying secular objects and worldly things around you to expand your understanding of them so you can better do what you do best, whether that be art, scientific learning, economics, etc., right? So for example, this guy right here is a fantastic image of humanism. Do me a favor and write under humanism, example, is this thing called the Vitruvian Man, right? So the Vitruvian Man, also known as the Virtue of Man, is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, okay? Now, giving you a heads up, it's not a drawing that he ever intended anyone to see, right? It actually was inside his journals that he wrote backwards and in code because he didn't want anybody stealing any of his really small ideas. Did he, Pio? No? Oh, thank you. So the big thing, though, the Vitruvian Man was a graph or a little, like, construct for him to actually show the proportionality of the human body so he could figure out how long do arms need to be in a painting? How long do legs need to be in a painting? Is there a proportionality of how many heads there need to be, like not how many heads need to be in a painting, but how large should a human head be when you're actually painting a new item or doing a new work? And he's going to apply these concepts he's learned to the Mona Lisa and create that masterwork. He's going to apply those concepts to the Last Supper, create that masterwork, right? So the Vitruvian Man we will talk about a little bit more in class, but you definitely need to write it down. Highlight it is important. It is going to pop up on the test, right? But to give you a more kind of concrete definition of humanism and what it is, because I know you're going to want one of those so when you're studying, you have to understand that humanism is the study of worldly subjects, right? Humanism is the idea of taking our sights off of theological perspectives, trying to not focus on religion or necessarily the afterlife or like parts or components of like religious or theologic study. Instead, we are focusing more on the growth of the individual human, right? Not actually like the growth, right? Like how big is this little boy going to get? We were talking about the growth as in how well that human can become, right? The Renaissance man focuses on humanism because he actually focuses on something that he can respond to all situations. Writers, musicians, linguists, artists, those are Renaissance men, right? The guys that can do a lot of these different items. I, for example, can write very well. I can play the recorder and like from 5th grade. I actually speak more than one language, and I'm a terrible artist, but I'm an artist all the same, so I feel like I'm a Renaissance man. But the big thing, though, is that study of secular subjects and secularism in general. So really quick, though, now that we know what the Renaissance is, this idea of exploding new thought, focusing on the world around us, trying to actually draw and make things better, make more money, grow our understanding of economic perspective and stuff like that in the Renaissance. Ain't that right, buddy? We need to understand why Italy, right? So why was Italy the one place that the entire Renaissance era is focused around? Like, why does it start there? Why is the bedrock of the Renaissance in Italy? Now, that's not to say that the Northern European countries, like what you would consider modern-day Germany, even though it was called the Holy Roman Empire at the time, or France, were not involved in the Renaissance, because they were, right? Actually, there's a lot of Flemish painters as well, so the Dutch were heavily involved in this as well. But you have to understand there's several reasons why, okay? So we're going to give about 6 different reasons, okay? I've only got 2 of them on here, okay? So, like, you're going to need to write down the other 4, okay? So first and foremost, you have to understand the reason why Italy is going to be home to this is because Italy is the home of the Roman Empire, right? It's the home of the former Roman Empire, so it actually has the largest amount of resources and the largest amount of stuff connected back to the ancient Romans. And since the Renaissance is literally a rebirth of those ideas, you're going to see more access to these original ideas written in Latin by Roman scholars and philosophers from that time period. Get back over here. During this early progression of the Renaissance. So the fact that it was home or the capital of the Roman Empire, that's very important. Also, since it was the home and the capital of the Roman Empire, there were a ton of ruins and artifacts that were still in good condition available for study and interpretation for these Renaissance artists to really capitalize off of, right? Number 3, another big reason why, is because it was the home of the Roman Catholic Church, right? Which brought a heavy amount of economic resources in, right? Because remember, the Catholic Church was still charging everyone in Europe that tithe, that 10% like tax on their that 10% weekly tax that they were supposed to pay on Sundays to all the citizens of Europe. And because of that, you're going to see an excessive amount of money coming into the Catholic Church. And since you got a lot of money coming into the Catholic Church, you're going to see the expansion of new churches and the beautification of them. And because of that idea, you're going to see a lot of artists a lot of these artists' earliest works are inside of very, very large Catholic churches, right? So that's a big reason why. Another big reason why, it is the home of banking, right? So the home of like economic growth and banking during this time period is another big reason why Italy was the home of the Renaissance, right? Because they were the ones actually storing most of Europe's money. Like, let me put it to you this way. Florence had so many large banks, or one of the largest bank, that when they made money known as the florent, that became like the universally accepted currency throughout all of Europe. That's how much money they had. So we got 4 reasons now so far, right? Another, Jesse, don't knock my computer off. Another big reason why it was actually the home of the Renaissance is also trade, right? A huge amount of trade was coming in and out of Italy due to its location on the Mediterranean. Now, because of this, you're going to have culturally diffused ideas coming in. You're going to see the expansion of understanding of art and literature and philosophy coming from the Arabic countries because of the fall of the Byzantine Empire and the growth of the Ottomans, because they were the ones that were holding on to all these different Roman philosophical ideas for so long and Greek philosophical ideas for so long. And then last but not least, for the reason why Italy is the home of the Renaissance, right? A lot of it has to do with the excessive amount of patrons that were there, okay? And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the word patron is P-A-T-R-O-N, and we'll talk about what a patron is, but there was a huge number of them in Italy, right? So Italy also, just so you know, was also still divided into a lot of small states, right? So it's not a country in and of itself. However, they are still connected to the Papal States, which is the home of the Roman Catholic Church. It's the European Continent Center for Banking, and then also this is what a patron is, right? So what that last bullet point, that last piece of the list I gave you, was the large number of patrons that existed in Italy is a big reason why it blows up, or the Renaissance blows up, right? Y'all are really ruining my flip with all your growling and your upsetness, and it's mostly just you, Pierre, all right? So not Cosette, she doesn't growl. Now, the big thing, though, going into it is the growth of this patroning class. Patrons are financial supporters. So let's say hypothetically speaking, that I found these two artists, right? These two artists' names are Pierre and Cosette, right? These two artists, I decide I want to have them paint or make a tapestry or paint a wall in my house, right? So I can show off how much money I have. I am apparently, now this makes no sense because we all know Mr. Terry has no money, but still. So the idea would be that I'm going to pay these two artists to make this piece of art in my house so I can show off my fabulous wealth, right? Well, the thing about it is I am their patron, right? So a patron is a financial supporter, someone who gives money to a Renaissance artist for them to create a piece of Renaissance artwork, right? And because of this, you have to understand the biggest patrons in the game, right? So, for example, the largest patrons you'll ever hear of are these people known as the Medici, right? Holy good golly, highlight these people, right? The Medici family is phenomenally important in the growth of the Renaissance, right? The Medici family of Florence were the informal and formal rulers of Florence for over 300 years, mainly just due to the fact that they were the wealthiest family that existed possibly in European history in totality, but definitely up to this point, right? Depends on who you ask, depends on how you argue the equity and the income of like Renaissance artworks included with their equity, but still, the Medici family, and it's Medici, okay? Medici, not Medici, okay? It's Italian, so get it right. Now, like, the big thing about it, though, is they were the ones who created the most powerful bank in Europe. The Medici family bank is going to be the thing that actually brings them a massive amount of power and wealth, right? Now, some of you are like, but wait a second, if they invented a bank, they can't use other people's money. Joke's on you. That's what banks do with your money now, right? When you actually take your money to a bank, they use it. They're just hoping that all of you don't show up on the same day and ask for it back, right? So the thing about it is, since they created that super powerful bank in Europe, they became massive patrons of artwork because of all the money that they were making, right? Now, as a patron of artwork, most of the artworks that we talk about during your presentations were Medici artworks, as in they paid for them, right? Some of these include the Primavera, the Birth of Venus, Michelangelo's David, God, what else? Like, there's several more. Now, looking at it, they also had a massive line of rulers that ruled over that city at any given one point in time as they evolved into this thing known as the Signori system, right? You don't even know what the Signori system is, but it is like, whatever. So this guy, for example, right here is Cosimo the Elder. His son right there, his grandson right there, Lorenzo il Magnifico, is like considered the biggest funder of artworks during this entire time period. But also, that guy right there, they're even going to have two different popes that enter into the papacy through this family, just to demonstrate how much power you have. That guy right there, Leo X, who is actually a Medici pope, is going to become a really big change maker a little bit later on. Now, since you've got all this money, since it's located in Rome, since it's happening in Italy, and since you're seeing a rebirth of these new ideas, we like to use art to symbolize the growth of economics and learning and intelligence because it's a visual representation, and also because of the massive explosion of the amount of art that was produced during this time period in Italy during the Renaissance. Now, the thing about it is why? What is different about the artwork that was being made during this time period than the artwork that came before it during the Middle Ages? We have to understand that the art in the Renaissance is much more stylized, right? Stylized in the sense of everything has a purpose and a place and a reason and a rhyme behind why it was placed there. It also is much more difficult to make if it's more stylized, which demonstrates someone being more intelligent, which goes back again to that word humanism we were just talking about. Very important. Humanistic perspectives are all about these artistic styles, right? Also, these new artistic styles are going to represent humans and landscapes. They're going to actually give perspectives with real life art and depth and proportion. Shading is going to come into major play because it's going to make artwork look more textured and much more real. Sculptors are going to also use their chance to study human anatomy, and they're actually going to study and begin to process bodies, go through autopsies and stuff like that to understand how the human body is put together so they can paint it better. If you understand how the human body is put together and so you can paint it better, you actually are going to get the chance to make a better artwork, and it's going to demonstrate that humanistic idea as well. For example, just like I was saying earlier with the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo, medical drawings, medical Cool drawings. All right, so here we go. Leonardo da Vinci actually had a series of drawings that he did on human anatomy so he could understand how to paint and draw the human body better. One of the most famous ones is this one, the image of a fetus inside of a woman that had actually recently died. So a woman and a baby had actually died together. They were buried in a graveyard outside of Florence. He had the body exhumed. He did an autopsy on it. This was illegal at the time, but he did it anyway. And then he actually cut everything open and studied the way that the entire, the child was actually placed inside of the mother's, birth canal, right? He also actually peeled skin off other bodies and saw how bones and muscle tissue was connected together. So if you know how to do this, this is going to even add to the growth of scientific study during the Renaissance time period, humanism all day. And to give you a visual example of the progression of art during this time period, this right here is Augustus at Ponte Verde, right? It is one of the most famous sculptures to ever be produced out of ancient Rome. So this was made in ancient Rome while Augustus was alive, right? So Augustus, of course, being the first true emperor. I hope you remember who that guy is. What's his original first name? Good job, Marissa. Very impressed. Now, the thing about it, though, is that is going to degrade into that, right? So these two artworks right here are Middle Age artworks, right? So as you can see, coming from ancient Rome to these two medieval artworks, medieval artwork took a step back. They are flat, they are one-dimensional, there are no defining characteristics of these characters' faces. I don't know who this little guy is. You've got there's no depth, there's no background, and even while Middle Ages art began to advance, it still did not advance dramatically. The proportions of these bodies are all off. The scaling is completely off. Details are missing and not included, right? And then this right here is a sculpture that was made in the 1550s. So as you can see, we're seeing a return to Roman art. We're seeing a return to Greek mythology. This right here is the Birth of Venus by Botticelli. I took this picture. It's absolutely beautiful. And then so it's absolutely massive as well. So look at the detail and the landscapes and the background and the shading and the stances of these human figures. And this one as well is another Botticelli work. That is Madonna with pomegranate, right? So actually this shows Mary right here holding baby Jesus. Now the important thing about this entire understanding of Renaissance art is also the inclusion of symbolism, right? So write that down with that list you have above. Symbolism, and put an exclamation mark. To give you an example, this entire thing is ripe with symbolism. The things the angels are holding indicate which angels they are. Since he's holding a lily, that is actually Gabriel positioned on the right side of Mary, right? Now looking forward though, you zoom in on Christ right here, he is holding in his hand with Mary a pomegranate. Now why would baby Jesus be holding a pomegranate? Because it actually is meant to symbolize the flaming heart of Christ, because pomegranates have all these little tiny seeds on the inside of them, and what basically Botticelli was going for is that those seeds represent drops of blood that this child will one day spill to save all of mankind, right? So that kind of symbolism is what I'm talking about, and that's the stuff that you need to know for your Renaissance art project. Now some of you are like, but wait a minute, Mr. Terry, I have a building. Yeah, so a couple of y'all actually have buildings, right? So now, well, actually, let me rephrase. There's one building that we talk about in this unit, and it's Brunelleschi's dome. Somebody will be presenting on this one right there. But architecture is also a very big symbolism of Renaissance art, because not just because a building is allowed to be art. It doesn't necessarily have to just be paintings or sculptures. There are buildings that can be considered rebirth humanistic styles of art, right? Architecture is considered the social art, right? It's called the social art because everyone can see it and everyone can view it and everyone can imbibe with it, okay? Now, the big thing about Renaissance art is it's going to do away with that old Gothic style. Remember, so the Middle Ages was all about Gothic architecture. Look how everything comes to a point. Look at these flying buttresses, these rose windows, these stained glass windows. Look how sharp everything is and how it's all one color because of its unified stone construction. Well, that right there is Renaissance artwork. So we're seeing a return of arches and domes and clean lines and not a lot of clutter on the exterior. So look at that Gothic architecture. That's Renaissance architecture, okay? So the thing about it, though, is you have to understand it's just much more clean and a lot less disorderly. So the thing about it, whenever you see Renaissance architecture, you almost always know it's Renaissance architecture because of the domes that are placed on top of them, right? So also, frescoes will be used to paint gorgeous ceilings and different pieces of artwork as well. Now, the thing about it, though, is you don't also limit Renaissance art to just visual arts, just sculpture, or just architecture. There's one more major one, and this is where we're going to end off on everything. writings. There are several. This is technically, if you really want to make the argument, the very first type of art to come out of the Renaissance is the return of literature and the return of writing, okay? So writings are going to come back, and they're going to be much more about philosophy and scholarly articles, right? There are going to be guidebooks for men and women to achieve success. You're going to see fiction make a massive return, and there's going to be a very important device that's going to change the game of the Renaissance and spread it super fast that we'll talk about in the next flip as well as in the next class, okay? But I'll talk to y'all about that soon. I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Go ahead and start looking up some stuff about your artwork. Some great resources to use when you're talking about these different artworks are YouTube, Khan Academy. You're more than welcome to find some information on Wikipedia. Just make sure you are making sure that it's coming from a legitimate source with its context and citations. And if you're concerned about any piece of information, come and ask me. That's the other big thing too. When you get done doing your research and you think you have enough stuff, come ask me. I'll pop quiz you on some of the stuff about that artwork to see if you have that info or see if you have it figured out. But I'll talk to y'all about that soon. I can't wait to actually go over these presentations with you. It's going to be a great time. Y'all have a good one.